Two players UConn needs to three-peat. You're locked on.
You are Locked On UConn, your daily podcast on the UConn Huskies. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And welcome to the only podcast on UConn that is undefeated since its inception. 12 and 0 win streak. We bring on today Jacey Zembal, a former hoops and football recruiting writer for Fox Sports and now recruiting guru for Rivals.com. Jacey, what two players does UConn need to bring in for them to have a chance at a three-peat?
It sounds like wings and centers are the main two spots, correct?
Yeah, I think so. You know, we're gonna dive into we're gonna break it down into centers and power forwards, and then small forwards and guards in the second segment. But if I started to ask you about UConn's offense and watching them play this year, what if I started throwing names at you? Some really interesting ones at the center position. What player just jumps out at you? For me, and this is a player because of his background. Maxime Reynaud from Stanford is 7-footer who can stretch the floor. He was a new transfer, he was a transfer that kind of started probably like a month ago. So he's taking his time. He's trying to graduate from Stanford. What do you think of him just out of the gates right there?
Well, it's interesting that one of the games I watched was specifically him against Arizona, which has the other very good center transfer, Usman Ballo. And, I look at Maxine and it's like, this guy is really skilled. I mean, he shoots legitimate three-point range.
Yep.
He moves in the post. He moves fluidly. And he's sneaky athletic. There was one play where Jaden Bradley, the point guard, tried to block his shot, and Renaud almost would have ruined his weekend if he didn't get fouled. And then I always look at it like this: is like he's in the Pac-12 and he's productive nearly every game. And there's something to be said. Now, I appreciate that UConn. And someone will say that Cam Spencer has a little bit of an asterisk because he did play at Rutgers, and that did help. I don't doubt that at all. But Cam Spencer became Cam Spencer because of his first 3 years at Loyola, Maryland. Tristan Newton played it 2 years at East Carolina. These were guys who showed that they could produce in a system at a high level at the highest achievement possible for 2 years. 1 year in a row for Cam, but 2 years in a row for Tristan. So, but there isn't as much projecting going on when you have a high major stud who gets it done against the best of the best. And that's one of the reasons I like Reynaud. And I mentioned Ballo, and he's going to be a hot commodity. And now at a smaller school, you have Amari Williams at Drexel, who's a huge human being. And
what's his like if we're doing a boxing, like what's his tail of the tape there? What's from
6'11",
Drexel?
I'm guessing over 250 pounds. And
okay,
going back, I go back a little ways on UConn, and once upon a time they had Andrew Bynum, who was slated.
Yeah,
there. And Bynum, when we watched him at the Nike camp, it was like, wow, is he a huge human being? Like there's big guys and then there's big guys, and Bynum had that bigger guy body. Williams, who's from, I believe from England, has a bigger man's body. He's 12 points, 7-8 boards. He'll probably block a couple of shots. He's a very accomplished player. So he's in the upper half of the Rivals.com rankings. And then the other part of this is I look at it as 2 A's with centers. There's the centers who could play 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And then there's the teams that are going to tag team the center position, which means it could be 25-15, it could be 20-20. They'll have 10 fouls to play with. Obviously, Clingan was a whole different, whole different level of center. There's a reason why he's going to be an NBA player for a very, very long time. But man, how much of a lift was it to have Samson Johnson right behind him?
Well, yeah, and I think that's kind of one of the reasons why I wanted to bring up a guy like Maxime, and the difference between him and Balo. Like Balo moves great. But he like you mentioned, there's bigs and there's bigs, right? Um, another intriguing guy, and he's more of a power forward, even though he's 7 foot, is Danny Wolf. These are I think of what I think of what UConn needs and what they're looking for are guys who can be fluid. You mentioned this, who I don't know if you've seen this. Their dribble handoffs, like they expect their centers to be not traditional post players. They take advantage when they see opportunities, like against Illinois when they didn't have any post presence. But if you saw, I mean, obviously against Purdue, really Donovan wasn't posting up Zach Edey, right? So they want their centers and their power forwards to be able to do it all. Is there a sleeper of the power forward centers that you think could fit into this UConn system that are kind of a mixture of Samson? You have Singhair that is going to play a role next year a little bit. I don't think he's going anywhere. 7-footer with speed, but it to replace Donovan Clingan is difficult. So where do you see them going? Do you think they're going to go more traditional, or are they going to stay true to their roots and get? He's probably going to Michigan, like a Vlad Golden or a or Danny Wolf, someone like that. I'm curious on your thoughts.
I really like Golden, and got to watch him obviously on their deep run with Florida Atlantic a year ago. But then I also watched him this year against Memphis, and it's amazing how much he's gotten better, and how at one point he was basically a cast off from Texas Tech, and now I think he had like 67% field goal percentage, which is really impressive. Wolf, is a tougher evaluation because of the Ivy League. He's obviously his production is great. Maybe not as athletic as some of the other bigs. I mean, obviously athleticism is important. That's
Sure.
It also shows what translates to higher levels. Like you don't have to guess with Cliff Amarui, for instance. You know what he can do at Rutgers. And obviously he's a great athlete. Then there's I look at it as tiers. One of the guys that I've targeted as a guy that I'd probably ranked higher than maybe others in the transfer portal game. But Ladisa Traore from Long Beach State was somebody who impressed me. He started off at St. Louis, ended up at Long Beach State. They made their run to the NCAA tournament while their coach was fired, Dan Munson, who was a very good coach. People forget now, but Munson is the one who actually created Gonzaga before Mark Few.
That's correct.
He handled it off to Mark Few. But Traore goes back to that dynamic. He's a grown man. He's 6'9", 250. So, obviously, not every team I look at, you have to have every kind of tool in the tool shed. Yep. And I found the Final Four fascinating because you had Clingan and you had Zach Edey and you had DJ Burns. And, even Zach Nelson was an accomplished center. No, not as heavy or bigger as those other three. But if you don't have a center to match up physically with all kinds of other kinds of centers, then you see what happens. I mean, Zach Edey was a video game against certain teams. Dump the ball off, let him go to work.
Yep.
DJ Burns was the same way for NC State. Dump the ball into him, let him go to work. And if you don't have that kind of center that can at least slow them down, then your team suffers. So I always look at it as, every team wants two really good centers, and if they have a third one, boy, are they spoiled.
Yeah, no. I'm gonna spit one name at you, and then we're gonna move to small forwards and guards in the second segment. He's a local kid to us. I know you're in Raleigh. I'm actually in Greensboro, North Carolina. So is Mikel Brown-Jones an interesting one from UNCG? He's a 6'8", 240-pound. You talk about a guy who's an older guy, probably 23 years old. I don't know for sure. He's a Philly kid, so he may have ties to Kamani and Dan Hurley. I saw him play locally here, in person, and obviously watch some of their games. I'm very impressed by his game. Very quiet kid, but is stands on business, as they say. He's fantastic on the block and can step out and shoot some threes. Good free throw shooter. What do you think? What do you think of Mikel Brown-Jones?
I think he's terrific. I mean, all across the board. Great 3-point shooter, kind of that new wave college power forward where he could go
Yep.
in and out. There's a niche of those guys because, I don't know how many of them make the NBA. I don't know how
Right.
many, have the size. They may not be quick enough or athletic enough to be a 3, but they may not be a 4, but they're perfect for the college game. And, he's been ultra productive at UNCG. Started his first couple of years at Virginia Commonwealth. He's someone that I saw in high school before he got to college. He's definitely made major strides in his game. But
Yep.
I appreciate guys like that who can fill up the stat sheet. I mean, he rebounds, he hits threes, he, gets some steals, he can block some shots. You mentioned UNCG. I thought one of the guys that was his teammate, if he had entered the portal last year, would have been very popular, and that was the point guard Keyshawn Langley.
Yep.
So it to me, they're just because you're at the UNCG level, that doesn't mean that you aren't very good players. I mean, I think there's not many schools that Mikal Brown-Jones can't play for.
No, I agree. Very familiar with the with UNCG, with Keyshawn, and definitely some good players have gone through through with the Spartans there. Well, we've gone through centers and power forwards. We're going to take a quick break and come back and talk about small forwards and guards with Jacey Zembal after this. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors is everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need and prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP. Bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions may apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, JC. Really great stuff on centers and power forwards. Let's dive into small forwards and guards. To preface this, obviously UConn show, people know they're getting Ahmad Noel, 6'1" point guard, bulldog mentality. I actually thought he was taller, but when I went back and looked, because of the way he plays, he comes across as bigger, really good, almost like a combo guard, but definitely a point. You have Isaiah Abraham from Virginia, 6'7" wing. So there's really we haven't really talked about this, but considering you're going to lose Donovan, considering you're going to lose Steph Castle, Cam and Tristan are gone. They probably stay another year, but they're not allowed to. And then you have Alex Caravan, who's 50-50. We're assuming that he's coming back, assuming that they don't have a mass exodus in the transfer portal with Solo Ball, Jalen Stewart, those folks. There's really only 2 spots for transfers. So that's why the title is what it is. So if we're going to look at small forwards and guards, of the 2 positions, do you think it's more advantageous to find a combo, or do you think you're going to try to find a true small forward, a shooting guard? What are your thoughts there?
Combos are always nice. I mean, there's nothing wrong with having a guy who
Sure.
provide insurance behind the point guard and whatever amount of minutes per half, if that's what they call upon them. Truthfully, I look at the 2 and the 3. There's so many of them. There's just so many of them.
How many? Real quick, let me pause you for a second. How many? I don't even know if you know this because it's so fluid, and if you don't, it's not a big deal. How many people are actually in the portal? How many players right now? Do we know that number? Like approximate?
Maybe over 1,300.
Crazy amount, right? 1,300 ish.
Or 1,300 ish, yeah.
That's wild, man. Yeah, I mean, there's no shortage of opportunities.
Sometimes I wonder how far back the portal goes, so it may not be like
wild, man.
The most current crop, but that it sounds cliche, but there's just so many wings.
Yeah,
and there's so many guys who can shoot. So to me, I don't know how schools go into a season and I watch them. I won't name which schools because I won't embarrass them, but I'll watch them and be like, how did you not get a shooter in the portal? Like
It's fair.
there's so many of them. Like how did you go into the season not having enough outside shooting? And the way the college game is changed. I mean, if you could have 4 3-point shooters on the court, that's unbelievable. But you almost have to have 3. And what Caravan brings is that 4th guy on the court. That's the sneaky presence of him. Is that when he's out there, then they have 4. That's the difference when you have kind of a combo forward like he is compared to the traditional 4.
Right.
But
Right.
I mean, we talked offline about Housen from Villanova.
Yeah. Yep.
And I looked at his stats. He attempted 176 field goal attempts this season. Guess how many from 3?
I'm going to say 170.
You were close, but it was 161, I believe.
Okay. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah, and
that's
I'm looking
what
at
he
like,
does.
he only attempted like 15 twos or whatever number it is. And I see that from time to time. To me, that's a little bit more at the extreme. But that was like, that's Jack Golke of Oakland ish.
Yeah. I mean, listen, if I was a 6'3" guard, I'm not that tall, but if I was a basketball player of that caliber, of that athleticism, enough to play Division I college basketball, that would 100% be me. That would be me. I would be the designated 3-point shooter. So I get it, man, and I think I think it's important to have those guys. I know sometimes you can't hide those guys, but in this offense with UConn, considering what they do, constant motion, Dan Hurley likes to say the music never stops. I'm going to throw a couple names at you. One that I saw this morning that I was shocked, not shocked, but surprised because of the school he's leaving from.
And I could guess who you're talking about because
Who
just played him.
Yes, go ahead. Say who it is.
Riley. I mean, when you have Griffin from Alabama,
well, two guys. So you're right, Rylan Griffin. We also just played Purdue. Mason Gillis is in the transfer portal.
Different players.
Different players, but both are threats from 3. Mason gives you a little more physicality. Rylan's more slick, can handle the ball a little bit. I mean, could you see either of those guys fitting at UConn?
I mean, no question with Griffin. I mean, to me, he has a chance to be an all-conference caliber 2 guard at some point in his career. But I believe in his game that much. I think it'll be interesting to see. Like, Alabama, obviously, they have their system with, dunks, layups, threes. So it'll be interesting to see if he shows anything more than dunks, layups, threes at his next stop. Right. But I mean, he is a terrific 3-point shooter. He plays with an edge. He doesn't have a conscience. He will let it fly. He was the one young guy in that starting lineup for Alabama for the most part. So I mean, I don't know the backstory. From a distance, it looked like he had it good.
Yeah.
From a distance. I mean, he was starting, he was playing, and they won. So for him to leave, there must be a very compelling reason. I don't know what that reason is, but it has to be pretty compelling. Gillis is more of kind of a plug and play 20 minutes a night. He was, I think, 47.5% from 3 this year.
Good shooter.
At least going into the Final Four. I liked what he brought, and this is more of a system thing, is sometimes teams want to hide their weaker post defender on the power forward if the center's a pretty good scorer. Which in Purdue's case, obviously, is Zach Edey. You don't want your star centers to get into foul trouble against Edey. So what I liked when Gillis was on the floor is that, well, you can't really put a Clayton or a DJ Burns on Gillis because he's 20-some feet from the basket. So, he stretches that defense out and he makes the other team have to play, more of a forward
right
on him because you can't hide your center, 21 feet from the basket because, again, 47.5% from 3. So he didn't have a huge game against NC State or against UConn, but he's a threat. And sometimes you want guys that are that threat because, it changes. It's a chess match. You know,
The other thing I would
it might mean who is guarding who is a little different because again, you have to guard Gillis 21 feet from the basket.
right, and the other thing I was going to say too is I think when and if I didn't say this, someone in my YouTube comments would be all over me on this, which is regardless of how good a shooter, whether it's Mason Gillis, whether it's Rylan Griffin, the thing that is going to determine whether they bring someone in is can they play on both sides of the floor. Rylan Griffin, not sure because Alabama's defense was ranked 104th, in Ken Palm.
Yeah.
Mason Gillis, I know, plays defense because Purdue demands that. I mean, I think they're top 20 in Ken Palm, maybe 12th this year. So that to me, like some of the names in here are sexy and they're nice. I joked with you that, what about Bronny James offline? A Wade Taylor the fourth, like some of these guys, their profiles have to fit both for Dan Hurley and his staff to consider. Rylan Griffin playing with an edge definitely helps, but can he channel that on both sides of the floor it remains to be seen.
I'll tell you one wing that the UConn DNA, and I have no idea if they've reached out to him. I don't know if they have a shot at him, but Tremaine Mark,
okay,
has UConn DNA.
What do you think is
Houston, and then he went to Arkansas this past year. It did not work out well, in terms of one-loss record at Arkansas, but he knows winning. He has an edge. He can play both ways. Good shooter, not great, but competent. I want to say upper 30s from three. Good size. It'll be interesting to see what he does because he's tasted life at both levels. He's been in the top 5 program that wins at Houston. And then he's been with a team that had a very dysfunctional year, and the coach leaves to USC. So, he's a Texas kid, so maybe it would be hard to get, him to leave his comfort zone as both, and obviously Houston and Arkansas are very close to each other. But, that's the type of player, I look at him, and maybe he won't be in the top 20 of the rankings of the portal. He might. Who knows? I have to really look at it. But that's a guy that I would value. Because I think, he's got the ability to really come and fill a specific role of being essentially a top 3 player on a winning team.
For sure.
So that those are the type of guys that I look at. And then, but then I'll stumble onto somebody else who, I don't know if you could get a kid, but they've gotten kids from the state of Washington and the West Coast before. But, people don't know who this Cedric Coward is from Eastern Washington. I have a hunch they're going to know by this time next year.
Okay.
He looks terrific. He's a Fresno, California kid who went to a non-D1 school, lit it up for 24 a game, ends up in Eastern Washington. And, Eastern Washington is one of those teams that ran roughshod during the regular season, but then lost in their conference tournament. Gotcha. And they would have been a pretty good sleeper team to do some damage, in the first 2 rounds of the NCAA tournament. And Coward looks like a guy who has a chance to be a pro. To me, he pops. And, not that UConn can get him now, but Terrence Edwards from James Madison, who ended up picking James Madison, or from James Madison,
Louisville,
ended up picking Louisville. That was a major get for Pat Kelsey. He's another guy. He pops.
He's close to not to make this about Louisville, but I think Pat Kelsey's a fantastic hire. He's in on the Ballo sweepstakes, right? I know that's I think he's in Ballo's top 3. So I think this has been floated around for a while. I mean, Louisville is a job where if you get a young, energetic coach like that, they can get anybody. Facilities are there, play in the ACC. But I digress. So I have two names.
There are guys out there that maybe not even big names, maybe they go to smaller schools, but Kansas benefited from the fact from Zeke Mayo, who's from South Dakota State, is from Lawrence.
Sure.
So they brought him
I mean, listen, that happens.
Makes total sense. It'll be interested to see what UConn's final plan really is, but they're in a position where players will want to play for them. Yeah. And, they should be able to just pick and choose, especially among the smaller school guys, and I don't know UConn's NIL situation, but if it's healthy,
it's healthy.
then I would look at it as, these smaller school guys who've not won at that type of level before. I mean, they'll look at UConn and be like, whoa, they should be blown away.
No, I don't disagree. I think we're gonna play a fun game that it's not my title. I have to give my friend Chris Smith a shout out here. I've seen him talk about Portal Combat. So the way
Mhm.
we're gonna play Portal Combat is when we come back from the break, we'll go position by position. I'm gonna give you two names, and you say who wins in the ultimate game of Portal Combat.
Sure.
But before we do that, I'm gonna ask you, JC, but mostly the audience. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you to bring your biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you the can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're going to talk about all of our fun Portal Combat after this. Have you ever had a frustrating time trying to snag tickets for a Major League Baseball game? I remember one time I was scrambling to find good seats last minute, but it was a nightmare. That's why I'm thrilled to talk to you guys about Game Time, the official ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball. With Game Time, getting tickets is a breeze. Prices drop closer as it gets to game time, and you get killer last minute deals. Plus, you can check out views from your seat before you buy. Personally, I love browsing through the app, checking out upcoming games, and scoring great deals. And the best part, their lowest price guarantee ensures you getting the best deal out there. Who doesn't want to save up to 60% off sports, concerts, and more? So take the guesswork out of buying tickets and download the Game Time app now. And for doing so, Locked On is giving you a little bonus. Use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms and conditions may apply. Don't miss out. Download the Game Time app today. All right. In our last segment, we're going to talk about names in the portal. I'm going to give JC two names. He's going to tell me who wins in the ultimate battle of Portal Combat. Doesn't have to be UConn specific, so it's basically two guys, your choice. You get to pick who you want, and it could be based off of just your overall feeling. Doesn't have to be because some of these guys have played at higher levels than others. So we're gonna decide based off of your expert opinion. So we'll go with the big boys first. So centers, we talked about it earlier in the show. Ballo, Vlad Golden. Who you picking?
Ooh, very different from each other.
That's right.
I will go with Ballo.
Why?
Because once upon a time, I saw him probably just. I'm not going to use a strong word. I just remember watching him play very, very well against Creighton 2 years ago in Hawaii on TV, and I was like, wow, he has improved so much from when he was at Gonzaga. He's one of those interesting cases. He got a lot of hype at 15, 16 years old. I mean, an extraordinary amount of hype. And I felt bad for him because when he got to Gonzaga and didn't do much at all, it was like, whoa, people were talking about him being like Shaq-like when he was at that young age. So for him to turn it around, but I know Creighton and Kalkbrenner, they have their own kind of philosophy on defense. They will let you score. They will not foul. But Ballo had I want to say he had a huge game. Like, I'm sure there's somebody who will look it up and be like, yeah, he really did have a huge game. But to me, he was just basically unstoppable in the post. And that's the physicality that he brings. But I do like Golden a lot.
Okay. This one probably is a lot easier, but I'm going to throw it at you anyway because we didn't talk about him yet. Jonas Adu, Tennessee center power forward, and Clifford Amoriu, I think is his last name, correct? Right, from Rutgers. Amori, yeah.
I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right either, but I always thought it was Amarui. Also very different players. I like Amarui because there's a physical edge to him. He's a very good defender. He's very, he has a little extra pop athletically. I've watched Adu since he was probably in his first senior year of high school.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a very slow development to get to the point where he's been at Tennessee. You know, people would know that first senior year he was getting basically like Big South, CAA type offers. There was not a huge market, and then after he did a post grad year, that is when it exploded. But that class, that particular time period, was a little off, a little different because that was the COVID stretch, so players didn't get evaluated as much. I still would go Amarui, but the one thing that Adu does that's really well, and I joked with someone that's close to him, I'm like, he needs to watch Robert Parrish because he gets a very high release on his jumper, just like the Chief did back in the heyday. And obviously there's a couple generations of basketball fans who have no idea how good Robert Parrish was. But 7-foot Robert Parrish could get that high arcing jumper off against anybody. And Adu has a little bit of that too in him. The one issue that Adu is going to have to overcome, and hopefully he uses it as a very strong motivation, is that Tennessee Purdue game did not go well for him.
Yeah.
And, he didn't play much. The backup center, Awaka, ended up doing better against Edey. It did not work out well at all for Jonas Adu. So, that's also kind of fresh in my memory. But, I think people know exactly what they're getting with Cliff. I mean, he's gonna play defense. He's gonna block shots. He's gonna dunk. He's gonna get 10 to 12 points. He's gonna get 8-9 rebounds.
Fair enough. All right, this one's a fun one. We didn't mention him yet, but we're gonna now. Bronny James or Brendan Howson. Who you picking? Portal comment.
Yeah, talk about radically different players. Here's my hunch. If I was doing it based on just next year, I would probably go Howson.
Okay.
He'll come in, he'll be, lock and loaded, and he'll fire away.
That's fine.
With Bronny, and only Bronny knows. I mean, when you have a cardiac situation and you miss so much time, and there's all the drama that goes with it, and the rehab, and the concern, and the worry. To me, it was amazing just that he got on the court this year. And
fantastic, yeah.
I know that there's people who will put Roddy high in the rankings for clicks. I get it. We're in that society of doing such things. At Rivals, we did not put him high in the rankings because there is caution. I don't know what he's going to do next year. In a best case scenario, though, very best case scenario, I think he is a glue guy. I think he could be a guy who could get 10, 12 points, hits a couple threes, play very good defense, make the right basketball play. And if he could graduate to doing that after everything he's gone through health-wise, and it'll be obviously the attention on whatever school he picks is going to be fascinating to watch from a distance. I knew he'd go to USC because I didn't think LeBron wanted him outside of the area to, he wanted to watch over him.
Yeah.
I don't know what he'll do this time, though.
I mean,
safe choice like Ohio State. There's a lot of different ways that they could go, but I think this one, assuming he is in college basketball next year, which is also a good assumption. But assuming he is in college basketball next year, I think it will be more about what school could get him best prepared rather than geography. But we'll see. I mean, Oregon was also a major factor the first time around too, because of all the Nike ties.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're going to put a pin in all of the transfer portal chatter for the rest of the day. Jacey, thank you for coming on. Stay with me as I get us out of here, but we'll definitely have you on again because that's all anyone wants to talk about now that there's no actual basketball games on. So we will have you back to talk more UConn transfer portal, especially when things start to fall, the dominoes start to fall into place. Locked On has launched his first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube and now is also available on Amazon Fire TV, covering 24/7 of the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available in the free Fire TV channels app. Well, this has been another episode of Locked On UConn. I'm your host, Mark Zanetto, for Jacey Zembal. Stay locked in, stay connected. Make sure your toughness meter is always rising. And as always, let's go Huskies.